over the past years who have been helping us. And tonight, dear God, as we meet to discuss whatever the report is bringing through, the reviews bringing through, help us to gain wisdom and understanding, and help us to discuss and participate in a meaningful manner. We bless those who may be listening by any social media, dear God. Give us a meaningful dialogue tonight. This we pray in your wonderful name. Amen.
Thank you. As I indicated, we will now hear from Mr. Osborne himself in a presentation that he prepared for this evening's event and for the other consultations that will continue through the week.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Derek Osborne, and I'm an actuary with the firm LifeWorks. And last year, we conducted the 12th actuarial review of the Social Security Fund. Every 3 years, the board is required by the Act to engage an actuary who assesses the current and projected state of the fund. This is the 12th actuarial review, and the report was laid in the House of Assembly several months ago. If you think about why Social Security exists and why it's so important for the people of Anguilla, the goal, the main objective is a comprehensive system of social protection that reflects Anguilla's value system. It responds to changing conditions, whether they be social, economic, demographic, and so on. And finally, it satisfies customer needs. So it's really an all-encompassing income replacement program that is really critical to the livelihoods of many Anguillians. And when we look at the future and the current as well, state of the fund, we look at three key things. Are benefits adequate, both when they're paid and how much is paid? On the flip side, are contributions affordable? If you think about benefits and contributions, they go in opposite directions. If we want bigger benefits, we're going to have to pay more contributions for them. And the third thing we look at is sustainability. Are we going to be able to deliver on the promises that have been made to generations to come, for children and grandchildren, without having to charge them very high contribution rates? On the right-hand side, we talk about what we're trying to avoid. The first thing is we're trying to avoid the fund ever being depleted or exhausted. We're trying to avoid situations where the fund may have money, but may not be in cash, and therefore pensions may have to be late because not enough cash to make pension and benefit payments. And finally, we also are very concerned about people going without. So in Anguilla, there is no formal unemployment benefit. Twice now, it's been implemented on a temporary basis. And so one of the objectives is to possibly implement a new benefit for unemployment. And the last point here is that there are many, many more self-employed people now in the labor market, and many of them do not pay contributions. The taxi driver, the vendor, the plumber, the carpenter, even the doctor and the lawyer. We want to ensure that when they get older, that they have a secure income to live comfortably in old age and not be a burden for their children, their other family members, or even the community and the state. So over the past 40 years, Social Security has a very good experience. We see these four charts here that pretty much describe the entire financial history of the fund. On the top left, we see that the contribution rate at 10% has been more than expenditure for most of those 40 years. In 2018 was the first time that the fund actually experienced payments out being more than contributions coming in. And that's why we see the green line is below the black line for those first 38 years, and then after that, it's above. And since COVID, the green line has exceeded the black line. The size of the reserve has been growing every year. However, the relative size of reserves compared to expenditure has been decreasing. And these two top charts are typical of all Social Security schemes in the region, where over time, the expenditure rate goes up. Eventually, it touches the contribution rate and surpasses it. And on the right-hand side, the reserves grow initially in the first few years, and then the reserve ratio comes down. What we want to avoid is the reserve ratio ever reaching to zero, because then we have no fund. And we also have to decide when is the right time to raise the contribution rate so that we don't keep dipping into reserves and eventually exhaust all of the previous savings that have accumulated over the first 40 years. The lower two charts show the yield on investments or on reserves, which has been relatively low in the last few years, and also shows the level of administrative costs as a percent of contribution income, which have been quite high. Almost 25–30% of contribution income is required to pay admin costs, and that is high by regional standards. We know Anguilla is small, but that cost certainly is above what we would expect from the fund. So the review looks at the future, and we've projected the population out 60 years under 3 scenarios. What we see here are 2 things. On the left, the population could grow to over 20,000, or it could remain pretty much where it is now, at over 15,000, and then eventually get slightly smaller. The key challenge, though, for the fund is that what we project is an aging population, where the number of children is going to decrease, whereas the number of pensioners, which is the biggest cost item for the fund, is going to increase. And that is the challenge that the fund will likely face in the next 20 to 50 years. When we project the fund, that is the actual dollars and cents that the fund has in reserves, we project that the fund will be exhausted between 2035 and 2038. So that is within the next 13 to 17 years. That's not a long time away. And this says that if we do nothing, if we leave the rate the same, if we leave the benefit formula the same, if we leave age 65 unchanged as the age for pensions, then the fund could be depleted within the next 13 to 15, 16 years. What we see on the right is that every year going forward, we expect expenditure to exceed contributions. We expect expenditure to exceed all income in the next few years and every year thereafter. And finally, if we do nothing and the reserves actually become exhausted and there are no more savings on which to draw, then the contribution rate required to meet benefit costs would be between 21% and 25%. And that means that the contribution rate would have to be increased to that level from 10% today, more than double in the next 15 years to help meet expenditure. And so when we assess the fund and we look at all of the aspects, both the financial as well as the social adequacy aspects of the fund, we identify these 5 challenges and concerns. Number 1, as you can expect, is long-term sustainability. We do not want the fund to be exhausted in 15 years' time. This is the same challenge faced across the region by every single fund in the Caribbean. And many governments are trying to find a solution that fits their particular country, their particular circumstance, to ensure long-term sustainability. The second one is diversification of investments. A large portion of it is a payment from the government of Anguilla, and so hopefully over time, you can find a way to diversify the investments and get a greater rate of return on the fund. I mentioned earlier high admin costs, and I mentioned earlier as well the growing number of self-employed people who are going without paying any Social Security contributions. Right? We need to make sure that the taxi drivers, the vendors, as I said, the tradesmen, lawyers, doctors, all are covering themselves so that when they turn 65 or 67, they'll be able to receive that lifetime pension. And finally, and I'm really pleased that what the Social Security Board is now doing with these stakeholder consultations is public awareness. It is important that the public know and understand the challenges that are faced by the fund and the measures that are going to be required to ensure that the fund is sustainable for the long term. So the question could be, how could a fund as large as Social Security fund be exhausted within 15 years. And there are 4 reasons given before us. One is demographics. We have no control over that. But if you think about family size over the last 30, 40 years, we're having fewer and fewer children. And that affects governments when it comes to taxation revenue. It affects the fund as it comes to the number of people paying in to everyone taking out. As we see here, there are about just over 5 contributors for every 1 pensioners. 20 years from now, that number may fall to 2.5, and then just around 2, 40 years from now. We also have a generous pension system. The scheme was designed 40 years ago, and what has happened is that half of the maximum pension is earned after only 10 years of contributions. And so someone coming to Anguilla at age 45 or 50 can get a very, very generous pension, having worked only 10, 11, or 12 years. The third point is that there are no guidelines. The actuaries have come in every 3 years, made recommendations, but there's no requirement for the government to act to ensure that that changes are made to make the fund more sustainable over time. And lastly, this is a challenge faced in many other countries, that politicians and governments tend to kick the can down the road when it's tough decisions to be made. So what we hope in Anguilla is that through these consultations, there'll be acceptance of the reforms that are required to save the fund, and therefore the government will be confident making those changes in the not too distant future. So while the projections show that the fund could be depleted within the next 15 years, all is not lost. We believe that there are possible changes that can be made. There are 4 ingredients for success and for sustainability. And the first one is a growing economy. The last few years have been challenging. Anguilla has had a history of periods of boom and some economic downturns. And so the number 1 ingredient for sustainability is a healthy and growing economy. Number 2 is good design. The fund, as it looks today, was designed over 40 years ago. Life has changed, labor market has changed. People are working differently. And so we have to find ways to ensure that the benefit formula, how much you contribute, when you contribute, how you contribute, all of those things are consistent with how life is in Anguilla today. Thirdly, we want to have effective and efficient admin systems. I mentioned cost a while ago. We want to ensure that more of the contribution dollar goes towards paying benefits. And so efficiency in contribution collections and benefit payments, and also working together with other government departments to ensure that those who are required to pay contributions pay their contributions in a regular and complete way. And finally, we talk about good governance, what I like to call honest and responsible government. And that's not only the minister and the cabinet and the board, but it's all levels throughout the organization, making sound decisions in a prudent way in advance of crisis hitting. And so the recommendation is that we put in place guidelines that are going to ensure that there's transparency, that there's accountability at all levels within the board, and that there's consultation when it comes to making these changes as we're having today. And finally, the report made several recommendations. And these recommendations are designed to, first of all, enhance sustainability and ensure that generations to come don't have to pay double of the 10% today for a smaller benefit. So on the top left, we have benefits. We want a less generous age benefit. Probably keep the same 60% maximum, but you achieve it over a longer period. We average wages over a longer period. Right now it's only over 3 years. We're going to recommend either at least 5 or 7 years, which means that the benefit has a closer link to your actual wages earned over time. We're recommending, including, as I mentioned earlier, a permanent unemployment benefit. That is the one real benefit that the fund is missing right now for income replacement. And so we recommend that that be added on a permanent basis. On the right, we recommend increasing the contribution rate. Anguilla has one of the lowest contribution rates in the region today at 10%. Many are moving towards 15%. In Barbados, it's 18.25% for the same benefits that you now have at 10%. And so we recommend at least a 12% benefit in the next few years, possibly to 15% as well. We recommend a new way for self-employed people to contribute. You know, they don't have the time, some of them, to come to the office between 8 and 4 to pay their contributions. Times have changed. We want the fisherman who had a good fishing day to be able to go on his computer and just pay contributions as he can. We also want to improve compliance through effective links with government departments, and again, to ensure those people who are supposed to pay contributions on time. Number 4 is admin costs. You know, we saw the cost over 25-30% of contributions. We can find a way to reduce that gradually over time. The investment policy needs to be updated. We also recommend 3 new policies for funding, benefits, and risk. And as I mentioned a while ago, good governance guidelines. You know, we know that there's a company, a subsidiary of the Social Security Board called ASSB. We recommend that it be reviewed to determine whether or not it's still needed. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier about consultation and sharing the news, is to share the actuarial review, share financial statements, and all of the board's reform ideas on the website and in public discussions as we're having now. So compliments to the board and the management for starting these consultations with the general public to ensure that when changes are going to be proposed and are recommended, that the public understands why and is buy-in from you as well. And on the lower left, we want you to start considering increasing the wage ceiling. It hasn't increased for many, many years, and it may be time to look at increasing the ceiling so higher income people can qualify for slightly bigger benefits. And finally, increasing the age from 65 to 67 for the age pension. And so I'm going to stop there, and what I would say is, again, I look forward to hearing the results of these stakeholder consultations, and the goal is certainly to ensure long-term sustainability at an affordable cost for generations to come. So those 3 final words I'll use again at the end: adequacy of benefits, affordability of contributions, and long-term sustainability for children and grandchildren to come. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Derek?
All right, today we've
Just want to say thank you to Derek for preparing that presentation for us that summarized probably about 80-something pages of document into that 15-minute presentation. And I think it said it all. We have some challenges in the next 15 years that to ensure that the fund remains sustainable, there will be some hard decisions to be made. And as I said, we're here today to hear from the general public. I want to recognize the chairman of the board, Social Security Board, in the audience, and the past director, Mrs. Jacqueline Perez-Norris, chairman, and Mr. Timothy Hodge, past director, and our board member, Mr. Kerry Kentish, among the audience. As I was saying, we have the report and recommendations before us, and we have a challenge to make sure that this fund, that's now 40 years old, remains sustainable for generations to come. As the actuary said, it will impact probably, well, as it is right now, if we do nothing, it will impact all of us here within the next 15 years once we are alive. But if we do nothing, again, it will impact future generations to come. So at this point, I want to go through the recommendations and hear from you, the general public. We also will have a forum where persons can send in their comments, questions, concerns at info@ssbai.com. And we will have a live call-in program on Thursday on Hammer, Thursday at around 1 o'clock. So we are still out there in the community. We go to South Hill on Thursday evening, and we'll be joined there by the people from West End and South Hill. So there'll be a few changes to our lineup, but we will reach the public however we can, and we will also, you too, as general public, can engage with persons you see, ask them their opinions and send them in to us. So we're asking everyone to be a part of this. I'll now go to the report, the recommendations coming out of the report, and invite your comments, questions, concerns. So that's Derek, if you would have heard his voice. And the first recommendation that we focus on here is to gradually increase the contribution rate to 12% by 4 annual adjustments of 0.5% each starting in 2023. So I invite comments on this, concerns. We know that we've just had GST. This would seem like another tax on us, increased tax again. So, but what do we do? In the face of what we're facing, what do we do? This is the first question. Anyone wants to comment? You can send your comments in to us at info@SSBAI, as I said before. Mr. Kentish, you look like you want to say something. The mic is coming to you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. George Kentish. You asked, there's not a choice here really, as far as I could see. Doing nothing is not an option in the circumstances. That's my take immediately of the presentation by the actuary. That's facts off the bat. That's not an option. So, and when I heard the actuary's report in December, it was, to me, alarming. And it needs to be addressed. I don't think that we have a choice of not accepting the actuary's report to implement those increases. Or else, I think the fund will probably, instead of 15 years, we may see it in 7. So that's my position on that. My other concern, which I had, is, which I'm going to air, probably, you're not the one who probably should answer this. I think it should have been known almost over a year that the director was retiring. It is almost a year on. We've had, I understand, someone acting, and that is the status up to this point in time. And it baffles me why, with such an important institution, and when you got such a report, why isn't there in place somebody, whether to appoint or recruit? Those are the options. Either to appoint whoever was acting, or to recruit someone. Because I cannot understand how we can treat such an important institution so callously without the appointment of a director. Where is the long-term planning taking place? to address those issues that are being raised. More than that, we have, it all depends on the economy as well. And what we also have is outward migration of people. And the young people who are supposed to be making the contributions to support those who have made contributions and to ensure that the fund continues to remain sustainable.
Right. And that was mentioned to the Premier last night.
Why are we arriving at such crossroads in our country so often with important institutions? Why? It is not because we don't have the skill sets, or the people with the capacity. We do. But we treat those people with the skill sets very demeaningly. Here again, another institution, critical institution, that has played an important role in supporting social activities, find itself in a very dismal financial situation today. I stop.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Ursula Webster Brooks, and I'm a retired civil servant. And I must compliment the Social Security institution because our pension, our Social Security benefits reach the bank on time, okay? And in order for us, for that to continue, I must support what Mr. Kentish said just now. That's why I got up. I didn't intend to get up until the end, just a thanks, okay? But based on what he's saying, if you don't do something now, even if not 2023, if we can say 2024, it all depends, how the economy going, and somebody who plug in may be able to say something. And again, being a past labor commissioner, I know that people should not be in acting appointments in such situations longer than 6 months. It has happened to some of us, okay? But it's something in a department like Social Security, and if people can migrate, the person who's acting can just pick up and say, I'm going somewhere else, and these things happen. And we've also seen, too, that people have stayed in these situations for over a year, and then come on stream somebody new, whether a local person or somebody else is recruited, and it could be demeaning, okay? And so as with the recommendation saying we have to do something. As it comes to the 67, the age 67, somebody like me retired from the public service at age 55, according to the pension, the laws we had at that time. And you'll work 10 years or stay unemployed for 10 years before you get Social Security. Okay? So I would not encourage, and I'm glad that the age now gone up to 60 or 65 as people may be able to stay in the public service, okay? So that's a choice for you all to make. And then again, we say the mention was made as the increase in the age to 67. That is something for you all to think about, okay? It's because in some places it is 70, okay? And some of those people might not have had an opportunity to consult. Even though we had opportunity to consult, look how many of us here. We are talking to the converted, because a number of you are working in Social Security and other places. But I'm hoping that they're listening, because too often when important decisions are made here, you hear, I didn't know. And that's what, like a union woman like me, I have to be always up and about. Because Mr. Tim would know that when the Social Security started, they had opposition with some of us as civil servants, and I was one of those. It's because, when you do, we're not educated into it, and we want our money. And I was paying the wages at Public Works. Men was not because there was no sense in their money. So when you come and taking out the Social Security, that you leave them with sense and whatnot, they wouldn't take it. Chances are, if it was just us, the public servants, so they were taking it out of our salary straight like that, it might not have happened. But those casual workers, show you plain, I'm not taking it. And therefore, we had to go back to the drawing board and have consultations like these. So thank you all for organizing these consultations. And one more before I go. Even though Kentish made reference to, sometimes when Social Security is contributing to the social services, people say, oh, look how Social Security wasting the money. But I've had an opportunity being a union leader to be close to some of those actuaries. And when I hear them saying Anguilla's doing well, in comparison to some of the other countries over the years and whatnot, I have the confidence of the actuary, and that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a quick, brief response. I know there's quite a lot of concern in Anguilla as to the director's position, which has not yet been filled. Just by way of information, under the Social Security Act, the filling of the director's position is under the purview of the governor. That process is still underway. Right now, we do know that the application process is still underway. That's correct, Chair? And so right now, what we have been doing as a board and as a management team is trying to work with the recommendations as best we can. There's a team on the ground. We have briefed them as to what it is contained in the actuarial review. They've had the actual review to review for themselves. And the best that we can do right now as a board, I understand that sometime very soon, we would like to fill the director's position, but in the absence of that position being filled right now, we are still trying as best possible to press forward. Because as the actual review has shown, we can't sit and wait until there's a director seated to act on certain recommendations. If we are paying attention to what's happening in the wider Caribbean, the very same sort of recommendations are coming out of the actuaries. You from Barbados, from St. Kitts. A few weeks ago, I saw something coming out of Antigua in relation to the instability of the fund. I know that the actuary had mentioned sometime early on in his presentation here this evening about how careful we have to be in relation to using funds and how historically funds have been used, again, in his words, by government to do certain things which may not or may be under Social Security purview. So it's our duty now as a board and as a management team now moving forward to ensure that the funds are really applied to the purposes under the Act, right? Because if we don't do that, we follow the recommendations, we stabilize the fund, and we continue spending, not within the purposes of the Act. We're going to find ourselves back in the same position if we don't buckle our belts and, act in accordance with the fund, yes. So I just wanted to, let you guys know that from our perspective, even though there's a director that's not seated right now and we don't have one as yet, we are still on the ground working as hard as we can. As you can see this evening, several members of the management team are here. I'm happy to see them, and I'm sure you all are happy to see them, which shows that they are actually committed to the process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kentish.
I would like to address the recommendation on the 4.5 percentages over 4 years. Let's say we do that next year. Just run an instance. If we do it next year, how much leeway or cushion will that give us before we need to increase again?
Well, I don't think the objective here is to increase again. So what the objective here is, given what the actuary has recommended in his report, I encourage everyone, it's 85 pages, to sit down and read it. What he's recommending is that for the next 4 years, we increase contributions by 0.5%. And so you're not hitting the contributors with the full 2% head on. The idea is that when we increase by the 0.5% each year, we are doubling down with our risk management policies, we're doubling down on our budgets, we're doubling down on all of these things to ensure that we don't have to come back here. It might very well be in the next couple of years, we don't know what's going to happen on the next actuarial review. We do all that we can, we buckle down as much as we can. I'm not going to sit down here and say that we are never going to increase the contributions again. But what I will say is that the idea right now is to increase, stabilize, and manage this fund properly. That is the idea.
Thank you, Mr. Kentish, for that clarification, and we can move to... Oh, okay.
Pardon?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Hodge.
Evening all. I just wanted to say that nobody who knows anything about Social Security should be surprised to see that recommendation. That is the model on which Social Security is built. It is partially funded. It increases, its contribution rate is supposed to increase over time in steps, because it is never fully funded. It is partially funded, and partially funded means that you don't have a full bucket. When you reach a certain point, you adjust a little more, and then you continue at that rate until you're required to have another rate. If I had an actuarial book in front of me, I'm sure, and there's a diagram, or if you can go online, and you look at the partially funded, you will see that contribution rates increase in steps over time. And this is expected from day one, and in fact, it is expected that the period at which we are today, at 40 years, that we would have been at that period at 25 years. So that the Anguilla Social Security system has outperformed its model. This recommendation here is a recommendation that should have been expected, that should not come as a surprise, is not out of the model that the Social Security system is designed under, and in fact, that the recommendation is only 2% is saying quite a lot. Because as you have heard, the contribution rate that is being recommended in other Caribbean countries is 15%. It's 18% in Barbados, and in some countries in the world, it's 30 and 35 and 40 and 50%. In some countries in Europe, it's like 50%. In Australia, I think it's like 50%. So, yes, 50%.
Per capita. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that an increase to 12% is, I would consider reasonable. I would consider that it's something that should get the support of the people. Of course, it is very, very tough times. It is tough times. I paid my electricity bill yesterday. That used to be under $500. It was $1,020-something. And I was shocked. I guess that's why they sent me to pay. I could see the more eyes. But, so obviously it is not an easy time, but this is something that is needed, and I would commend it. I'm not necessarily commending 2023. That is a political decision that has to be made. However, and I think that's what Mr. Harrigan was just inquiring as to, if you will see something happen if you do this next. No, you won't see it. It's something that will take time
Gradually.
to take effect, to give effect, for the effect of the change to be seen or to be recognized. So, it may be that, I don't know, that maybe that now is, maybe they can delay it or whatever. But as was said, as Mr. Kentish rightly said, these are decisions, and actuarial decisions are actuarial recommendations are generally recommendations that should be followed. And you would have heard him say elsewhere that a lot of governments have kicked the acceptance of those recommendations down the road. So you recommend it to my government, I want to get re-elected, so I don't increase this and increase that. I kick it down the road, and then the further down the road you kick it, the more serious the implications become.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge.
This can't be about, and I take your point, but this can't ever be about what a particular administration wants. The fund operates, supposed to operate free from political influence. There's a particular model. That's why you have the actuary there. He tells you when the fund is not doing well and when the fund is doing well. So whether or not a government has a particular view as to, when we should do this, that really should not interfere or influence, rather, when these recommendations take flight. We don't have any time. We've got to do it now.
Thank you. Within the report, the actuary also would have said these things have to be done now. So I don't think he left any leeway in terms of.
He's very clear about what needs to be done and when.
Have to start. He spoke about, and we just talking about, creating 2 new policies, the funding policy and the benefit policy. And from these policies come the changes such as the contribution rate, increasing pensionable age, and changing the age pension to a retirement pension, which is something that can be decided. In terms of the retirement pension, that would mean that persons who retire as it is right now, you can reach age 65, continue to work, receive your Social Security pension, and not pay contributions no longer. Mm-hmm. In some countries, you would either don't receive your pension and you continue to pay contributions, or you receive a part of your pension, a reduced pension, and continue to work. So those are some of the recommendations and actions that would need to be taken. And he's saying in 2023, reiterating the 2023. The board at this point has approved the recommendation, or in line with the recommendation. However, the pensionable age, which will be 67, should be further discussed. Last night, the minister asked why the board would have taken that decision to further discuss the age 67. So I don't know.
Chair, you want to speak on that? Not now, because we have the same cameras.
Okay, no problem. Reduce administrative costs. The board recommends that temporary hold be placed on hiring new staff and restructuring staff to carry out roles. And so, any concerns, questions about the administrative costs? We would have heard the actuary say that we are high in relation to other countries. And I know this has been a concern of the actuary for many years. Our administrative costs, of course, we are small, and that may have some impact. However, it's something that we will have to address in different ways. Other than just the staff component, there are other things that will be done. We have a new administration system now that will impact the way things are done, the way benefits are paid. Ms. Brooks would have made reference to how she gets her benefit on time, and they'll be even more timely and less work, and less rework. So these are things that Social Security has already started to implement. It's a bit costly now, but there are other ways of reducing that cost, the maintenance cost of an administrative system, and those are things that the board is looking into. Any comments? Of course, as I said, you can always send your comments into info@ssbai.com. So even if you don't want to share it tonight and you want to reflect on what's being said, think about it, read up some more. Those who are outside listening in, we're looking forward to your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, just to say, I heard the interview on radio with the actuary with Keystone Graves, and he referred to of course I've seen the report as well, so I may not make it appear as if I haven't seen the report. But I heard his interview last week.
It's been on running, it's rerun, yeah.
It's been running, okay,
Yeah.
rerun, okay. So in it he refers to persons receiving disability benefit. I think that is a very important element that I don't see being given prominence here. I haven't seen it, and I didn't hear it either, but I think it is very important because disability benefit in some countries, certainly in the advanced countries, the countries with advanced systems, are not, and he also referred to it. Here, if you're disabled, you're disabled. Whereas in other countries, you can be disabled to a certain extent, and you could still go to work, and you can still earn wages, and probably earn disability benefit. Here, you either disabled. If you're disabled and you go to work, you don't get the benefit. And of course, if you're disabled, that means you're not earning what you had the potential to earn either. So, two things here. One is the revision or the revising of that law, and two, the question of rehabilitation. Because with rehabilitation, it has been proven that a lot of people can go back to work. Here, there's the issue, if you go back to work, you lose the benefit, and you need the benefit because you're not working and you have not yet been rehabilitated. So I think it's something that is an area that the Social Security system can save a lot of money, but would probably need to invest as well in the rehabilitation services and personnel and services.
Also, just to add to that, Ms. Brooks, Ursula in Carla normally, she's wearing a Diabetes Day shirt, World Diabetes Day shirt, and that too came up. Disability is growing. We are seeing a lot of claims now with disability, young people, and Anguilla apparently is either the number 1 or number 2. That was number 2 in the world, beating Africa in diabetes. So this is something we have to think about, our health practices, and Mr. Hodge was saying about rehabilitation, also working with the primary health care. I know years ago we used to do a lot of work with primary health care, and that is an important aspect in our living, the way we live, our wellness. It impacts Social Security, it impacts the people who work and contribute, and on the other side, we have to pay them benefits. Any other comments?
Mr. Hodge mentioned about the disability aspect. I can't envisage that the proposed increase would cover such a matter, incident. The proposed increases from the actuary
In the
would take into consideration Tim's proposal.
Rehabilitation you're talking about?
Yes,
The cost of that?
precisely. Because those are costs. Because what I understand now, what is being. No. In terms of disability, you.
But you could have gone back to work if you had been rehabilitated. So you pay for rehabilitation services that cost you $200,000, and you save $300,000 in Social Security benefit costs. So yes, you can afford it, but you got to do something that's structured and done. And you don't go very far to see it in practice. It's a matter. Because they are very, very heavily into rehabilitation. It's in Europe, as in the United Kingdom. Not that medical services don't try to rehabilitate you, but I'm saying targeted rehabilitation to allow people to get back to work, even with limited facilities. But get back to work so that they can go on. So that if the person was earning $2,000 or $4,000, and they now going to get a disability pension of $2,400, we're saying instead of paying you $2,400 disability pension, we're going to try to let you on $1,200, and then we pay. So you get the same $2,400, but you also feel that you are being productive, and it makes a difference. I have heard cases, I know of cases in my experience where two persons suffer the same disease or illness. One is rehabilitated and goes back to work. The other stays home, and within a year, they've given up on life. So that is because when you can be productive, it has a lot to do with your psyche and in turn your physical ability. So this is something that is going to be good, win, 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 win. But it is going to come with an investment in rehabilitation services. Now there are people here who do rehabilitation, offer rehabilitation services. It just means that this will be an expense.
Well, maybe it's the government who needs to take on that.
Well, it's the government or whoever, but the point is, invest in those services. Social Security Board has a vested interest in people being able to go back to work, and when they go back to work, they're paying benefits, paying contributions, as opposed to receiving benefits.
Thank you. Okay, investments. Fine? Go ahead. Investments. We know that we speak about contributions, but we also need something else to supplement those contributions, and it's investments. However, as it is in the current environment, investments are a challenge in the international market. And the actuary is saying to update the investment policy statement and include specific target asset allocations for different asset classes, location, and sector. And this is a recommendation that the board has also approved. We have our investment manager here with us. Can probably tell us a little bit more of the challenges with the investments right now in terms of our overseas investments and our local investments.
Yes, in the investment environment is extremely challenging in terms of in our local markets, which is in Anguilla, is that our main assets are is tied up in a promissory note from the government of Anguilla, which is paying about 3% on that instrument. However, in terms of CDs, we're getting little or nothing in the banks. And then when you go out to the regional markets, it's, we're talking about some of the countries are probably in the same boat as Anguilla in terms of their economies. So it's making it difficult to find investments in the region, so there's limited options. And in the international market, we're now experiencing where the market has have negative returns. It's probably down about 20% for the year. However, that is also look as a buying opportunity, because then you could buy good companies at a good price. However, you have geopolitical unrest in the world, which is you can see between Europe and Ukraine. We also have high inflation, which is also impacting in investments, and we are experiencing the same thing, high inflation and low interest rate. However, in order to take advantage of all of this, we have to make sure that the fund is well justified, both regionally, locally, and internationally.
And I think the actuary would have made particular reference to the $214 million that the government has with Social Security, the promissory note. We must say that the government so far has been paying that back as agreed, so that is a good thing. However, those funds are not available for investments which may give us better returns, even though right now it may not be that good as Carla was saying. However, it changes, and we want to know that we have funds when the opportunity arises to invest. The market gets better. So, age pension. We spoke about age pension, and the actuary is recommending that we revise the schedule of pension accrual rates. And we look at, instead of the 3 years that we use right now to calculate the pension, instead we use 5. He recommended 5 or 7, but he focused on the 5 years. The board, there has been a legislative review that has been undertaken. It has not been completed as yet, and the board is recommending that this changes to the legislation will be reviewed in medium priority, which would mean probably not immediately in 2023, because we're right at the door of 2023, but sometime pretty much down the road, and not too far down the road. What the actuary is saying, that persons can pay contributions for like 10 years and get a pretty good benefit. So those same persons may not have worked, may have worked somewhere else, so they're getting a pension from somewhere else, but yet they're getting a handsome pension from Anguilla when they only put in a few years. And we know at that age they would have hopefully worked somewhere else. So most likely they are receiving a pension. And these are all things geared to bringing down the administrative costs. As CITCO, as the actuaries would have said, as CITCO is an investment arm of Social Security, was necessary for the development of properties in Anguilla. The board has conducted a review of ASSB at the time when the actuary would have made his presentation. That was not completed, but it's completed now, and we now will have to await the decisions of the board as to whether they're going to continue, the board is going to continue with this, or recommend that they continue with this, or investments will be done under the arm of the Social Security Fund itself. Of course, everything has an expense. This is the child, per se, of the Social Security Board, and therefore, Social Security has been carrying this subsidiary for a number of years, and at some point, we have to leave go our child. So that may be the time is now, as we see these challenges. Any comments on ASSB? Sorry? Oh, the cost. I don't know if our financial controller will have that information on hand right now, but if not, we can get that to you. You can put that in the chat to remind us, and you will have a response. Okay? Implement a permanent unemployment benefit. And the board recommends that a start date in 2023. We all know what happened with Irma, and we all know what happened with COVID. And we know the impact that they actually would have spoken of, the impact this would have had on the fund, because it's not funded. We are not collecting contributions for these events, and there's no guarantee that one will come down the road. Another event that we haven't even thought of will come down the road, and then again, well, as it is right now, Social Security can't bail anybody out, so we need to start to think seriously about this unemployment benefit. The actuary made mention of a 1% contribution rate. However, it has not been studied. Like any benefit package, anything you buy, it has to be priced. So the details of it, I don't think the actuary has gone into as yet, in case anybody wants to know what it's all about. That will have to be finalized with the actuary. But thoughts on unemployment, are we willing to pay now for that benefit? Mr. Kentish, you're willing to, well.
He can pay for me.
You're willing to support,
He can pay for me.
right? That's what Leo.
I believe it is necessary, based on our experience with COVID and Irma, I think it is necessary that the board considers getting information towards implementing such a scheme down the road.
Down the road.
Well, it could, well, I said down the road, but because there are challenges, it means if you're going to consider it now, is that 2% adequate? Okay.
1%? Unemployment?
Unemployment benefit system. So
But you heard what their contribution rate is.
follow up and see. We can follow up, well, particular because remember their population different to ours.
Yeah.
The Hurricane Irma and the COVID, the cost to the Social Security Fund came in actually under budget. Right? Of course, it was continued by government on its own. The government continued to pay it from its own resources. I mean, Social Security was just the instrument, the vehicle. But the point that I'm making is that the benefit itself with something that was as widespread and as heavy impact as Irma or COVID shows that it's something that is manageable, and so therefore manageable and not necessarily a high cost. Because if you think about a hurricane, you may have a hurricane once every 10 years, let's say. So the other years, there are going to be years that you're going to be positive. You're going to be accumulating funds to pay benefits, to pay these unemployment benefits. And then the year will come and maybe the hurricane will come, Irma will come along, and then, you know, so it's going to be balanced out over time. So I don't think that is something that persons should be hesitant to do. Personally, I have been recommending this for a long, long, long time, and I really think that it is something that you do in the good years. You don't wait until the Irma comes or the COVID comes to do.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Okay, another recommendation, and this is to assess whether specific employment injury benefits should be added. The board recommends that this be moved to high priority. Let's hear from Ursula on that.
Right now, you notice that we don't have an insurance system in place for some of these people, like carpenters and those kind of people who do that kind of work, huh?
If they lose a finger and something like that.
Yeah, and every now and then you hear somebody fell from somewhere and they walking on crutches and all the rest and the rest. And like we do not have a national health insurance system, national health insurance scheme, these people are out there at a limbo. Sometimes even some of those hotel workers, some of these women, particular home housekeeping, after a while carrying these load of big pots and laundry things and whatnot. They come down with all kind of ailments and things, and then sometimes when they go, when we give them disability benefits, and then sometimes that have to stop, and so sometimes they're not. So we got high priority for that.
Okay. Okay, I think in this case, the actuary did, somewhere in his presentation, he did mention that is one of the benefits that's missing, I think. And we move into universal coverage and the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030. And I think if we are to achieve that, we would have to think seriously about this benefit. In other countries, in some industrialized countries, it covers like you lose a limb, you know, so but we pay, if you lose a limb here, you wouldn't get anything for that limb. However, you will get a sickness benefit, you will, right, so. Okay. And he spoke about good governance, and the board approved this recommendation. The board pays into an organization called ISA, International Social Security Administration. They prepare a set of good governance guidelines, and the board should probably review those to see what it can use from them and make some adaptations to suit its current environment. Update the risk management policy. The board approved this recommendation. And share, as the actuary was saying and commending us, to share this and other actuarial review reports with the general public and place them on our website. We can say this report is on the website. Well, it's shared widely. And the board, as I said, the board again has approved this recommendation, and it has been done. Thank you. If there are any further questions, I think we just locked in our 7:30 time.
On the good governance report there, that can only be successful based on the caliber of people on the board, of directors on the board. And this, as we know, in the Anguillan context, has been a problem over the years. So unless, when it comes to statutory bodies, there's some seriousness in recognizing that we have to appoint people with the necessary skill sets to ensure that they live up to the good governance standards. You're not there on the board because somebody had put you there. You have an obligation to the institution and all the members of Social Security. So that is as far as good governance will go, as far as to the caliber and the willingness of a government to allow good governance in the institution.
Thank you.
My contribution and my wisdom in talking this afternoon came out of my union experience over the years and being involved in the church. Because remember, it used to be the church and the things we used to do, these institutions to carry out these things, okay? But not that I want to be on any boards. I've had my years of being on that, and I know we have enough people here with potential to be able to sit on these boards with integrity.
Thank you.
My final comment, I think it was disclosed earlier that the selection of the director comes under the purview of the governor. That to me is even more alarming when good governance is one of her prime and principal responsibilities. And to have that vacancy open for a year, wow, it says something about good governance. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to thank all who participated and thank those who are listening out there. And as I said, we continue with our presentations. On Wednesday, we're at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Thursday, we're at the Adrian T. Hazel Primary School. And we'll wrap it up there and also have a live presentation on Hammer at 1 o'clock, so tune in. And as I said again, submit questions, concerns to info@ssbai.com. We're going to be monitoring and looking for questions, concerns. The government of Anguilla wants to hear from you on the actuarial review, so please do so. Thank you.